District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Vice Minister, it's a pleasure to meet you here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me here.
Could you introduce yourself and talk about what your role is in the Lithuanian government?
I'm Albinas Zananavičius. I'm the Vice Minister of Energy in the Lithuanian government, and my area of responsibility is overall energy strategy, external relations, meaning internationalization of Lithuanian energy sector, and I'm also in charge of decommissioning program of our old nuclear power plant.
Ignalina?
Yes.
Power station, interesting. So for Americans who don't know too much about Lithuania, why is energy so important to you geopolitically, economically? Could you explain for my listeners who don't know?
Well, energy was instrumental in regaining our independence. And for those in the West who have still some illusions that one can run business with Russia, we always saw it differently. Because Russia started pressing us in the energy field in the very beginning of our independence. At the moment when we have proclaimed independence, but only a few countries in the world have recognized it, Russians decided to cut supplies of oil, gas, and also reduce supply of other raw materials. So we had a very difficult time at that moment. And I think once we have received recognition of our independence, we're starting step-by-step liberation of our energy sector from Russia. We were 100% integrated. So the liberation was a step-by-step approach, but it was constant strive to get more and more independent. So the first step was that we have built our oil import terminal, and by that, Russia tried to force us to sell our oil refinery to Russian businesses. We have resisted, so then they stopped supplies of oil through the pipeline, which was the only way to get oil before we built our terminal. But once we refused to sell it to Russia, they stopped exports to Lithuania, and we started importing it through the sea. So the first link with Russia was severed already back in 1990. We started importing oil from elsewhere. The gas story was quite similar. Of course, at some point back in the late 90s, government decided even to allow Gazprom to take a stake in our national gas company, but it turned out that after that we started paying prices which were like 20-30% higher than Germany. So the only way to liberate ourselves was to nationalize the company, to compensate Russians, and then we also installed our LNG import capacities. We were the 8th country in the world to adopt FSRU technology, and it also proved instrumental when the war with Ukraine started. We were supplying natural gas to the whole Baltic region. So that LNG terminal was the guarantor of energy independence of the Baltics. The third step was in the electricity sector. We were fully integrated into Russian electricity grid, and to separate from it was the most difficult step. We will eventually cut all the lines with Russia on the 8th of February next year. but it was quite a journey to achieve that. We also stopped trading electricity with Russia in 2022. And I think these steps that were undertaken earlier, also steps taken in the electricity field, they allowed us to be the first country in the European Union to stop importing Russian energy resources in the beginning of 2022 when the war started. So by April of that year we were free already.
It's true to form for Lithuania, because my listeners know that I have direct ties to Lithuania with my parents being from there. It was the first to break away from the Soviet Union, now the first to break away from Russia's stranglehold on the electric grid, which is a really cool facet. And Lithuania has worked a lot with the United States. I think, for context, people don't know that liquefied natural gas has been exported to countries like Lithuania. Lithuania takes in a big share, and I think you'll take a bigger share. Is that what your country is anticipating? Let's say as this outgoing administration leaves, this new Trump-Vance administration comes in, do you anticipate possibly taking more LNG?
Yeah, I think for us it was crystal clear that if we have financed alternative infrastructure to be free from Russia, there's no way we can accept Russian LNG in our terminal. Therefore, it is now forbidden by law to import Russian LNG into Lithuania through our LNG installation, which is called Independence, by the way. We were also very vocal that European Union, which suffered quite a bit because of the dependence on Russia, especially on the imports of oil and natural gas through pipelines, needs to be very cautious, diversifying their suppliers, and that Russia eventually should be eliminated from at least LNG market. And the latest trend that we have seen in the European Union was quite worrisome, because some European countries started increasing imports of Russian LNG. And I think this is not very wise, and in Europe we will need to find ways of addressing that. So we were arguing to get rid of Russian gas from the very beginning. Having said that, we are roughly importing half of our LNG from the United States. Half of it comes from Norway, which is much closer and has some logistical advantages. But at some point, we were importing around 80% of our LNG from the United States. So I think that both European Union and United States have to find ways of enhancing LNG trade between ourselves. Also making that relationship long-term strategy and choice, meaning that we advocate for long-term contracts of LNG supplies to Europe.
I was just reading a bulletin today that said that, previewing what Trump's energy agenda looks like. And for my professional reasons, I was very curious about this too, because it relates to my policy interests as well. But they're going to have a really big emphasis on LNG. So I think there will be some partnerships made more concrete or established or firmly planted. But a deal that transpired ahead of our meeting today was something related to nuclear energy. And for context for listeners, Lithuania did have an Ignalina power plant until you entered the European Union. It used to supply 70% of your electricity. Now you still import, from my understanding, 70% from that. And I've noticed and I've observed that I think there are 12 of 27 EU countries that have signed a compact to try to supercharge nuclear. Lithuania just signed an agreement with the United States to explore the development of Generation 4 small modular reactors. So is Lithuania going to get on board nuclear? I know there's been some tussling back and forth. The voters, I think public opinion wanted nuclear reactors. Then when it came to a vote, it didn't succeed. And there were attempts, I think, from GE Venona in 2012 to establish nuclear reactors. Didn't succeed there. Do you think it'll succeed with small modular reactors with this deal that was signed with the Department of Energy?
Well, you were right. We were heavily nuclear country. I think we had the largest share of nuclear produced electricity in the world at some point. And of course, closing nuclear power plant in 2009 was really painful because, imagine a country losing lion's share of its generation overnight. So, of course, we had to increase, build a new gas-powered generation capacities. We had to build interconnectors with Poland, with Sweden. But at that point, we were also part of Russian electricity grid. There were no trade restrictions, and Russia simply dumped our market with their cheap electricity. So it was impossible to develop domestic generation capacities. Once we got rid of Russian electricity trade, we still remain in the grid for remaining 2 months, but we stopped electricity trade back in 2022. We started immediately developing our own domestic generation, mostly at the moment from renewables, from solar and wind installation. And you mentioned figure that we used to be importing 70% of electricity. Today we import less than 40%.
Oh, that's good to know.
So in 4 years' time, with this government, we managed to double our local generation. With the pace of investment into new generation, I think by the year 28, 29, we will be 100% self-sufficient.
Okay, interesting.
But then, once renewable energy reaches certain amount in your electricity system, one needs something which is dispatchable, stable, and so on. And then also having in mind decarbonization requirements in the European Union that we all have to stick to. Also seeing development of economy which requires more and more electricity, like for data centers. We have some ambitions to produce semiconductors, other things. We see that in a quite foreseeable future, our demand for electricity will explode. So it won't be enough generating capacity in Lithuania, and therefore, roughly in the middle of next decade, like 2035, we would need some type of new generation. So we are hopeful that by that time, generation for small modular reactors would be ready, would be technically and commercially tested, so that we can employ that technology. The agreement with the United States government that we have signed today allows us to get more technical cooperation and get ready for deployment of those small modular reactors, and also we will be receiving assistance in selecting what type of technology is optimal for us. So I think this will be a win-win cooperation because, we are not newcomers in the nuclear world. Once we decide to proceed, I think we can move very, very fast because we already have a site for the new nuclear installation. That site has all the necessary infrastructure. We have experienced regulator. So in a sense, although we are at a very initial stage today, we can move very fast. And our timeline, meaning that we would need new installations sometimes around 2035, is quite attractive also to SMR producers we are contacting. So I think that with this intergovernmental agreement, we will get an upper hand access to American technology, American knowledge, and also it was important to put Lithuania on the map for countries that will be developing nuclear generation.
I think a lot of American businesses, I'm thinking of one in particular, I don't know if they've had discussions with Lithuania, it's called Oklo, and they make these Aurora prototypes, and they look like a ski chalet or like a ski lodge, but they house small modular reactors underneath, so it blends very well into the environment. And there are other types of concepts. I think globally there are 80 some odd SMR concepts, so that's one, and maybe that company will engage Lithuania. But here in the United States, we've kind of had this conversation about for energy, do you want to reach timelines or do you want to achieve reliability? And I think that conversation is starting to occur in Europe too, and that's why you've seen even a lot of renewable proponents say that solar and wind can't meet the capacity needs, they can't meet the electricity demand that we have, and so a lot of people are opting for nuclear for, like you said, data centers. All the tech companies here, Microsoft, Google, et cetera, have really gone aggressive in SMR technology. So we do kind of see that shift to nuclear, and I think it would be the same in Europe, especially in Lithuania too, with wanting something reliable that doesn't just feel good but also is reliable and can deliver on the electricity demands that everyone is having globally.
Yep. Well, there are several aspects that have to be taken into consideration, and the price of electricity, the final price of electricity, is not something we can ignore.
Sure.
Because our businesses are global, they have to compete with not only countries in the European Union, but also with other countries having less strict environmental regulations, less strict climate regulations. So we are looking at the energy system that is able to support our economic growth. We are one of the fastest growing economies in Europe. We see that it is impossible to reach a certain level of development without having abundant energy sector, abundant energy supplies at acceptable prices. So we are enthusiasts and champions of renewables at the moment, because our grid capacity allows to build them and maintain them. So we are quite happy building both solar and wind generation. We are launching 2 large offshore wind projects right now. And I think all of these intermittent installations will be successfully integrated into grid without undermining stability. But we are seeing the future that at some point there will be not enough renewable generation, and at some point that intermittency management becomes extremely expensive. So we did a study and modeling with National Renewable Energy Lab here in the United States. We have a project called Lithuania 100. That is a kind of a model how Lithuania can transition to 100% decarbonized economy. And that analysis shows that the optimal scenario is that we move both renewables and nuclear. Then the grid stability is the best, and also prices are optimal. So this is something we are pursuing. It remains to be seen how fast the technology of the 4th generation SMRs is coming to a market. I think we all should do some heavy lifting with the nuclear regulation. I mean, I'm working with the decommissioning, and I see that the nuclear safety regulations sometimes they are taking too long, and we cannot wait, because competitors in Asia, they will be breathing in our back. So we have to also streamline our regulation without compromising safety.
We have the same issue here in the US too. Yeah, with nuclear. It takes forever. I think the most recent plant that became online, Vocal, in Georgia, the state of Georgia, it took 7-10 years to come online fully. So we understand the frustration here in the United States too.
So this is something that I think this is one of the areas of cooperation between European Union and United States, where we could do better. And I think if our regulation, nuclear regulation, would be harmonized, that would also produce enormous advantage for our nuclear companies.
Is there anything else you want to add in our conversation?
Well, I think it is important. It is important to say that United States is extremely important to Lithuania, and that importance it has started long time ago. I still recall my grandfather listening to the Voice of America. It was completely forbidden, and in the cities those radio transmissions were jammed, so it was not possible to listen to that in Vilnius, where I was born and raised. But when I went for summer holidays to my grandparents' house, we were able to listen to that Voice of America. And I think people were always looking at the United States as a source of inspiration. So my call, my wish to United States is that well, you are leaders of freedom, so you have to continue that role, not to close only to take care of domestic issues. I think you are the global player and leader of free world. So I look forward to future cooperation with the United States, not only in the energy field, but in much broader sense.
I think there will be that cooperation. I think what maybe Lithuanians hear from the United States, it's very kind of, how would you say, a lot of talk, very loud talk on social media. But I think still at the core of our country, we want to have cooperation with countries that like us, especially our allies, such as Lithuania. And I know for energy, people will be very excited to work with Lithuania. And I have no doubt you'll be engaging our incoming Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. He's a very fascinating, compelling character, from what friends of mine who know him tell me. And he will definitely be a partner for Lithuania and other countries who want to do energy deals with us. So thank you, Vice Minister, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.